Hey guys, Golden Messiah here and welcome to another Diablo 4 build guide. In this build guide, we are taking a look at the brand new and improved Druid Pulverize, which has very quickly turned into my favorite build this season. And if you've seen the clip that I just showed you before, then you can understand why. It's so fun to play. You just walk in, you blast the mobs with Pulverize, and they all just get deleted. It's so fun, fast-paced, huge AoE, and let me tell you something, druids are eating good this season. I first tested out this build during the PTR, when they first introduced the new weapon called the Rotting Lightbringer. I have to say, at the time, I was not impressed. The new weapon was pretty bad, mechanics were clunky, and it just couldn't compare to your standard legendary two-handed mace with shockwave aspect. However, with a brand new rework, this item actually slaps now, and it does a ton of AoE damage. Not only that, but now the damage also overpowers. We also have a guaranteed source of poison for our procs such as Envenom, and just general, it's a super fun build to play. Just blast demons and send them back to the burning pits of hell. Now, there are two main variants of this build. One plays with the new improvements of the Grizzly Rage, which is the current meta, and the other is playing with Petrify. Both are good, both have their strengths and weaknesses. Grizzly Rage is currently the meta, it is a little bit more tanky, does a little bit more damage, but you absolutely can play both, and I will showcase both versions, their strengths, their differences, and why you should pick one over the other. So sit back and relax because as always I will guide you through the entire process, all the skills, item, Paragon, and more. But before we do, these videos take a long time to make. So if you appreciate these efforts, I will be thankful if you will hit that like button and sub because it helps my channel out tremendously and it tells me that you like this and you want me to do more of that. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get straight into the build itself. Alright guys, so I'm gonna start with the skill portion of this guide. First I will cover the Grizzly Rage build, and then I will go over the Petrify build just to see what the differences between the different skills and different builds. I will talk more about how the builds play in the actual gameplay portion of the video and what are the main differences there. So for both builds, we are starting off with Claw. We need a source of werewolf damage because we want to proc our quick shift passive because this is one of the biggest sources of damage for any druid build. And Claw is perfect in that regard because it also has this attack speed increase which is perfect, for just making sure that we get these procs as soon as possible. Then here, all points go into Pulverize, Enhanced, and Raging. 1 point into Heart of the Wild just so we can put 3 points into Wild Impulses. And we're gonna put 3 points into Iron Fur. So we gain 16% damage reduction while in Verbear form. So this is just going to ensure that we are super tanky. In combination of a couple of items as well, you will see that we are incredibly tanky when we're in the Verbear form. And even more so in Grizzly Rage form. We're gonna put 1 point into Cyclone Armor. Now, this is kind of a 1 point wonder that gives us a ton of non-physical damage reduction. When we morph into Grizzly Rage, we lose the access to the active portion of the skill, but we still benefit from the passive portion. So this still kinda runs in the background, if you will. 3 points into Backlash. We deal 16% increased damage for 5 seconds after casting a defensive skill. So we have one defensive skill here, which is the Debilitating Roar. So every time we cast it, we gain a lot of extra damage, and Backlash is part of why. We're gonna put 3 points into Ancestral Fortitude, just for additional damage resistance. As already mentioned, the Debilitating Roar, Enhanced and Innate. I put 2 points here just to bring the cooldown a little bit further, because I had an extra point to play with. You can distribute that point differently if you want to. 3 points Feral Aptitude and 3 points Nature's Reach. These are just, additional sources of damage multiplication for us. Now, one aspect, tags are pulverized as Earth skill. This allows us to tap into these different benefits and multipliers that would usually be inaccessible to pulverize, but now we actually take full advantage of that. So we're gonna put 3 points into Crushing Earth and Stone Guard as well. 3 points into Mending for more life. 1 point into Trample. Because this is a Verbear skill, it will remain while we're morphing into the Grizzly Rage form. And honestly, we rarely use it. This is mostly when your Grizzly Rage kind of expires. You can use this to gain Unstoppable and some extra mobility. Although those cases are pretty rare, you're gonna see in the gameplay portion what I'm talking about. But it's not a bad thing to have, one skill point here, it is sometimes useful. 1 point here, Neurotoxin, and then we're gonna put 3 points into Envenom. This is of course our biggest damage scaler on the skill tree, which is true for pretty much any druid build, and thanks to our new weapon, we're actually applying poison all the time, so the uptime of Envenom is actually never a problem on this Pulverize build. 3 points into Toxic Claws as well. This has been reworked, so now it just straight up gives us additional poison damage. In the Grizzly Rage version of the build, all of our damage is 100% poison, so this is just another big source of damage multiplication. 3 points Defiance, 3 points Natural Disaster. Again, because our Pulverize is also a nature magic, we benefit from these passives. We're gonna put 3 points into Defensive Posture for extra damage reduction while fortified, and I put also 2 points into Nature's Resolve for increased procs of Fortify. You'll see that we gain Fortify incredibly quickly. 3 points into Quick Shift, another huge source of damage multiplication for us, and also 3 points into Hide Incenses for extra move speed and damage reduction. And then Grizzly Rage, 1 point into the skill itself, Prime and Supreme. Because this is a Grizzly Rage version, we are basically in Grizzly Rage all of the time. To be fair, this skill is amazing, but also incredibly gimmicky. What you have to know, essentially, here is that kills and overpowers by bosses increase the duration of Grizzly Rage. Basically, 99% of the time, we are permanently in Grizzly Rage, which is great for us, because that means that we're also pretty much unstoppable all the time. So we just gain ton of damage and damage reduction and unstoppable. It's overall an amazing skill, but it does have a certain gimmicks which I will talk about a little bit later. Sometimes if you don't press it before the duration expires, it's going to go into entire cooldown, which is probably a bug, but if that happens to you, then you just lose a huge amount of damage. This is both the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of the Grizzly Rage variant, because if your Grizzly Rage drops, you will basically do very little damage for 30 something seconds, unless you like on Torment 4 or something. In that case, it doesn't really matter. But if you're pushing into the pit, you will definitely feel a noticeable drop in damage. I will demonstrate a bit later what I actually mean by that. And finally, we have Ursine Strength. This is just an amazing key passive for us. Let's talk about the Petrify version of the build. One thing you have to know is that because we are rocking the new reworked aspect of Ursine Horror, this does two things. Number one, it tags our Pulverize with Earth, which means that it benefits from all the Earth and Nature magic multipliers, but also every time we overpower, our Earth skill cooldowns are reduced by almost 1.5 seconds, and our weapon overpowers all of the time. This means that we're going to be having a permanent uptime on Petrify, and ideally we want to spam it once every couple of seconds for additional benefits. So, most of the things here are the same, but there are some differences. So for the Petrify version, Claw remains the same. Over here everything is the same. We have to put 2 points less into Iron Fur because we need these points for other things. For instance, we will be taking full advantage of Earthen Bulwark because it's a herb skill, so it's going to be resetting all of the time. So we want to make sure that we just have kind of the utility that it provides, just extra barrier and unstoppable as well. But not just that, but also we have Backlash, and Backlash gives us 16% increased damage for 5 seconds when we cast a defensive skill. We're gonna be casting this once every couple of seconds, so we pretty much always benefit from this big damage bonus. We had to take away Cyclone Armor, so this build is a little bit squishier than the Grizzly Rage build. Instead, we are rocking Blood Howl, Enhanced, and Preserving. This is going to be also another huge uptime because it reduces its own cooldowns on kills. So we're gonna be benefiting from this increased attack speed, almost permanently, which is a huge source of additional damage and utility. 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude and 1 point Vigilance. We are still going with Debilitating Roar. These passives are still the same, as are these. And then down here are also, of course, some differences. So Petrify, just put 1 point here, Prime and Supreme, with a couple of tempers into the Petrify duration and cooldown reduction, and combined with the Ursine Horror aspect, we will be having a permanent uptime on Petrify, so you'll have to sink in all of the points here as well. Petrify is great because, you know, it gives us a huge source of crit strike damage, and also every time we pop Petrify, we also get 100 Spirit, and it resets all of our other non-ultimate cooldowns. So it's just a really fluid build where we're just kind of constantly mashing on Petrify, and we're kind of mashing on the Bulwark, always using Blood Howl, and whenever it's something off cooldown, we press it. And in the meantime, of course, we're just spamming Pulverize and destroying everything in sight. Everything here is still the same. Now, with one noticeable difference, we are putting 3 points into Catastrophe. We are going to be casting Petrify on a pretty regular basis. Unlike Grizzly Rage, where we just pop it once and we forget it, Petrify, we're gonna cast it once every, like let's say, 5 to 10 seconds, so we will be benefiting from Catastrophe most of the time as well. Then we're gonna also put 2 points into Defensive Posture, 3 points into Quick Shift, 1 point into Hide Incenses, and the key passive is the same. So most of the things are actually the same, with a couple of key differences. Main being that we are going with Petrify instead of Grizzly Rage, and we are also going for Earthen Bulwark and Blood Howl instead of Cyclone Armor and Trample. So if you're feeling overwhelmed a little bit by these skill differences, by the way, don't worry about it. As always, there will be a planner down below, both in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. So if you have any trouble or you need to reference something, the planner is going to be there for you. Now, let's talk about the items. I try to make the differences in these builds as seamless as possible, so you can actually use the exact same items for both variants. There will be slight differences in tempers and aspects. Other than that, you can use the same items. Of course, because you cannot reset tempers indefinitely, it is advisable maybe to have, and let's say, I'm rocking these gloves that have Grizzly Rage duration, but you maybe want Petrify duration, so you would get gloves that have the same stats, but you can just temper them differently, and then you can just use Armory over here, like I have, to load between these two different builds. So just kind of like my advantage. You can, in theory, use the same items, but tempers will be different, so I recommend you get the items that have the same affixes and stats, but just temper them differently. That's also going to be in the planner as well. So, of course, let's start with the helm. This is going to be Air of Perdition. This is the best in slot item. To be quite honest, it's really hard to beat. This is just a straight up 60% damage multiplication, and also the stats of this item are amazing for us. This tops our crit strike chance. So as you can see here, I have 93% crit strike chance, but because we're also rocking some tempers, like for example, Earth crit strike chance, this does amount to 100%. So not only does it give us 60% damage multiplier, it also gives us crit strike chance, and also plus the core skills, which we of course also benefit from. So this is the best in slot. However, Crown of Illusion is actually a very viable alternative. So until you can get Air of Perdition, Crown of Illusion is a very good alternative as well. Here we're going with Shroud of False Death. Not to repeat myself too much, but in my previous video I also said that this is the best item in the game. 1+ all passives is just insane stat, and also it just provides so much utility, so much damage for us and everything else. And also, plus to all stats, activates all of the rare nodes in the Paragon board, so this item is the best in slot. Of all the 3 mythics that this item is using, ideally you want to get this one first. And of course, if you can masterwork all stats, try to hit it with as much crits as you can. If some crits land on max life, that's fine too. And of course, I also have an entire video completely dissecting Shroud of False Death, dissecting this item entirely and kind of analyzing it, why it's so good. So if you wonder why this is the best item in the game, I will just link the video here so you can click on it if you want to learn a little bit more about the mechanics of the item itself. Good thing about this build, however, is that it is not mythic dependent. I understand that it's not always easy to get these mythics, so Insatiable Fury is also a very decent alternative. It provides more bonuses to our Ursine Strength key passive, more life, more damage resist, and also +5 to all Verbear skills, which Pulverize is. So it's a very strong alternative. Of course, to be completely honest, Shroud is like 5 times better, but until you get to this point, this item is a perfectly fine replacement. For gloves, we're going with Willpower, Attack Speed, and Pulverize. If you could get a GA on Pulverize, that would be amazing, but if not, that's fine too. Attack speed is so good on the Pulverize Druid. Like, let me just show you. Bam, 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 bam. It just feels so good to have a huge attack speed. So overall, so I would definitely recommend it to put it in the gloves if you can. And for tempers, we're going with Pulverize Size and Grizzly Rage Duration. For aspect, we're going with Shockwave. Because of the rework of the Shockwave aspect, it now also directly works with the Rotting Lightbringer. So that's just another huge source of damage and pretty big synergy between these two things on the build. Both of these mythics are pretty much the same for both variants, but if you're rocking Petrify, then instead of Grizzly Rage Duration, you will be putting Earth Crit Strike Chance and Petrify Duration instead. For the pants, we're going with Tippo's Will. This item is the same for both variants. I really try to make sure that the differences are as minimal as possible. Now, this item is amazing in a couple of different ways. First of all, it just straight up gives us 30% damage while unstoppable and for 5 seconds after. So for both variants, this is pretty much 100% of the time. I will talk about that in the gameplay portion, but basically, Grizzly Rage has already baked in unstoppable. We are literally unstoppable all of the time. So that's amazing. And we benefit from this 20% extra damage increase, but more importantly, you can see my Master Road affix here. 40% damage reduction while unstoppable is huge. This allows us to just be incredibly tanky, just along with all other bonuses, and it makes us incredibly hard to kill. Now, Petrify does not provide us with the same bonus, but there is a workaround around that as well, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. For the boots, these are the same for both variants. We're going with the new reworked aspect of the Earth Sign Horror. This is an amazing aspect that does so much for us. So for the Grizzly Rage version, it basically tags Pulverize as an Earth skill and provides us with tons of additional damage multipliers, both through our skill passives and through our Paragon board as well. For the Petrify version, however, it also has an additional benefit of decreasing Earth skill cooldowns every time we overpower, and because of our weapon, this build overpowers every single time. So we're gonna have pretty much a permanent uptime on Petrify for the Petrify version. So tempers are also the same for both variants. We're going with Pulverize Size and Movement Speed. And for the affixes, Willpower, Armor, and Movement Speed. Now let's talk about amulets. The best amulet, just like with pretty much every single druid build that has ever existed, is Willpower, Envenom, and Quick Shift. If you cannot get such a good amulet, however, and I know it's not easy to get such an amulet in the game, then what I'm rocking right now is actually a very decent alternative. This is the next best thing. So Willpower, Envenom, and Wild Impulses. Wild Impulses also provide us with a lot of extra damage. And actually, Wild Impulses are even preferable if you're just blasting in Torment 4, because for the Grizzly Rage version, you actually have to attack with Claw and Pulverize and Claw and Pulverize and Claw and then Pulverize to get the 6 stacks of Quick Shift. If you want to take full advantage of that, because you don't have access to Werewolf skills during the Grizzly Rage form. So if all you want to do is blast to Torment 4 dungeons, for example, then Wild Impulses is actually even better, because you don't have to do any of the prep work, you can just blast. Ordinarily, you will have to hit with Claw and Pulverize Claw, and then you have 6 stacks of Quick Shift, and then you transform into Grizzly Rage, and you no longer have access to Werewolf skills. But the Quick Shift stacks remain. However, with Wild Impulses, this is actually even better for Torment 4, because you don't even have to do that step. You just go in, and you blast immediately, and you're done. For the Grizzly Rage version, we're going with Rabbit Bear Aspect. Rabbit Bear Aspect is amazing. It adds a ton of extra damage for us. It says, while Grizzly Rage is active, our direct damage is converted into poison, and we deal up to 120x more poison damage. So this means that I'm actually missing 15% extra multiplicative damage, but also what this means is that this aspect turns all of our damage into poison. This is very important. This is the biggest difference between Petrify and Grizzly Rage builds. In Grizzly Rage variant, because we're always in Grizzly Rage, we are dealing poison damage 100% of the time. However, in the Petrify version, we are dealing part physical and part poison due to our weapon. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. For tempers, we're going with Pulverize Size and Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction. However, For the Petrify version, Shockwave aspect is going to go here, and Retaliation aspect is actually going to go there, just to squeeze in a little bit extra damage on our Shockwave aspect and the physical portion of the damage that we're doing. And for the Petrify version, our tempers are going to be Pulverize Size and Petrify cooldown reduction. And the third mythic, which is also pretty amazing for this build, 50% damage reduction and also just a ton of resource cost reduction, which in combination with our weapon pretty much guarantees that we never run out of spirit. So this adds tons of incredibly valuable affixes for us. So attack speed, core skills, and crit strike chance are all amazing on this item. Of course, if you cannot get it, that is fine. Then you would just rock a legendary ring with retribution aspect on it. So there's always a workaround. This is definitely not mandatory, but every single mythic that you have elevates the build significantly. And for the last ring, we're going with willpower, crit strike damage, and lucky hit to make enemies vulnerable. Now, you can replace crit strike damage if you want with attack speed. If you feel like you don't have enough attack speed, you can definitely do that. Especially if you still don't have Ring of Starless Skies, you can use one ring and put attack speed on it. So this depends on your preference. And for the third affix, lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable is going to be one of the main sources that we apply vulnerable to our opponent. So definitely I recommend having that here as well. So the affixes are the same for both variants. Now, however, for the Grizzly Rage variant, we're going to be rocking Earth critical strike chance. This is also why we have 100% critical strike chance, by the way. And Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction. So this kind of just guarantees that we continue to have a permanent uptime on Grizzly Rage. And also the aspect we're going with is Rampaging War Beast, which increases our duration of Grizzly Rage, and in addition it also hugely increases the crit strike damage of Grizzly Rage as well. So just adds a shit ton of damage to the overall build. For the Petrify version, we're going with aspect of Changeling's Depth instead. We do a lot of damage while attacking poison enemies while in Werber form, which is going to happen all the time thanks to our weapon. We're going to also keep the Earth Critical Strike chance temper, but the second temper is going to be Petrify cooldown reduction. And finally, the star of the entire show, what makes this build so good in Season 9, is the new weapon, Rotting Lightbringer. You can do this by farming Urivar or Varshan or Belial and then selecting Varshan to get the drops. So by far the best affix here is of course chance for Pulverize to hit twice. This is straight up a damage multiplier for us. Ideally, if you can, try to make sure you get a greater affix on willpower as well, because this is a percentage willpower. This is usually not available on weapons. Usually this is only available on things like an amulet. So this is just straight up gives us more than 50% extra willpower. So definitely something that you shouldn't skip. This item has in general really valuable affixes. And also resource cost reduction is another affix that is amazing. If you can get a triple GA like to hit willpower, chance, and resource cost, that would be pretty amazing. But if you hit these two, that's also really good. But the most important one, of course, is chance for Pulverize to hit twice. And then, of course, you want to make sure you max out the damage on the power of the item itself. As you can see, I still haven't. So I'm definitely missing like 60% extra multiplicative damage here. So 60% here, 15% here. There's still plenty of room for me to optimize, but you will see later that I easily cleaned Pit 90 with this build. It was a non-issue, but there's definitely a room for improvement. So this item has been reworked and now it's actually really good. So it creates these poison puddles that can also splash and then they do additional damage. I will say the splash is a little bit bugged. It doesn't always work, but even without that, it's still a very good weapon. So much better than what it was in the PTR. They really massively improved it and it definitely enables this entire build to shine. Alright, so with skills and items out of the way, let's talk about seasonal mechanics now. So for the Grizzly Bear version, our main catalyst is going to be Disintegrate, because it's just the best one in terms of damage, but also utility. It has the lowest cooldown, and generally speaking, it just kind of makes it, the best out of all of them overall. For Infusion, we can go with Nebulous Extract for 10% increased damage reduction for all enemies affected, or you can, for example, go with something like Glacial Nimbus, which is going to apply chill. So I personally recommend Nebulous Extract if you're going to the higher tiers of the pit for more damage reduction, or perhaps Glacial Nimbus for more utility and more crowd control. For Arcana, first one is going to be Reactive Ooze. Now, even with all the reduction in spirit cost, for example, Pulverize only having 17 spirit, I think the base cost is 40, if I recall correctly, thanks to our Rotting Lightbringer and also thanks to our Ring of Starless Skies. Even with all of these combined, you will still eventually run out of spirit because we just have tons and tons of attack speed. Let me just demonstrate this. If I take this off, for example, I put something else, suddenly I lose spirit pretty quickly. But if I put Reactive Ooze back, I literally cannot run out of spirit again. So very important to keep in mind, in this build you will run out of spirit unless you're rocking Reactive Ooze. Second of all, we're going with Bottled Wind, just additional barrier. We don't have the luxury of having Bulwark on this build, so this is our main source of barrier on this build. And also, it lasts for 4 seconds and cooldown on our catalyst is 5, so we almost always have the barrier on. And thirdly is Shifting Powder. This is a big source of move speed and basically it just allows us to blast around, and is also an extra source of power arcana. The reason why that is important is because we're gonna go over to our legendary gems. So first one says that if we have 2 or more arcana from Schools of Power, we gain 15% crit strike chance and 35% move speed. So this caps us out on our crit strike chance. This is not mandatory, you can replace this with something else if you wish, but overall I feel that the build is the most fluid with this combination. Second gem is Idle from Below, so this is just a staple in any build. 6% primary stat, 6% max life and Unhindered. Unhindered is amazing, we just move through opponents and we can reposition ourselves however we choose to, so this is just probably the best gem in the game. And thirdly, the last gem is going to be Scornful Light. We deal 20% more elemental damage and take 10% more. Now, there is one variant to this. You can, for example, take off the move speed if you don't want to, and if you're pushing into the pit and you struggle with enemy barriers, you can take Potent Alloy instead of Shifting Powder. However, this means that you don't have 2 schools of power anymore, but you have 2 schools of denial. So you can actually rock a gem called Seal of Denial that says that while we have 2 or more arcana from the School of Denial equipped, we gain 30% more barrier, fortify, and thorns. So just an extra alternative that you can use if you find yourself struggling with enemy barriers. This is really only applicable to you if you're pushing into the higher levels of the pick. Now for Petrify version, we're doing a couple of tweaks. So remember when I said we're using a little trick to make sure that we have almost permanent unstoppable on this variation as well, so we can fully benefit from Thibault's Will? Well, that means that we're going to put in Tranquil Stone. Invoking our Catalyst grants unstoppable for 5 seconds, and Disintegrate has a cooldown of roughly around 5 seconds. So we don't have 100% uptime on Unstoppable, but it is still a 90% uptime on this build. So as you can see by my icon, I drop Unstoppable for 0.4 seconds. Other than that, I always have Unstoppable even on the Petrify version of the build. That's thanks to our Tranquil Stone. Second one is still going to be Bottled Wind, just for extra barrier. And third one is going to be Potent Alloy. We're going to be deactivating these barriers. And also we have 2 Schools of Denial, so we will be using Seal of Denial first. Other 2 gems are the same. Let's talk about runes. The best setup here is going with Ignitool. It's going to apply Frost Nova very consistently, just a very consistent source of vulnerable and freeze and crowd control. And the other one is going to be Back plus Jaw. So this means while we move around, we're going to be able to TP every now and then. To be honest, the second you try this combination, you never want to remove it, given just how fluid it makes your build, how much it speeds up all of your clears. However, if you are pushing into the higher levels of the pit, for example, instead of 2, you can put Vex. So Igni Vex, you're going to be getting up to +3 ranks of Pulverize. For second rune word, you can put Ohm, which is going to give us 15% share multiplicative damage. I would say that Ohm as a rune has been nerfed very significantly. It now requires, I believe, 600 offering and it's just not all that worth it in my opinion. But you can definitely pick these two if you're really pushing into the 95, 100 rank of the pit, and you don't really need all this mobility and utility to begin with. That this is the alternative that you can take. And also, one extra thing to consider, so you always want to make sure you are res capped and armor capped. Make sure that you prioritize armor first. This is easy to do with our consumables, so you can use Elixir of Fortitude, Blessed Guide for willpower, Song of the Mountain, and Soothing Spices. The combination of these two increases your armor by 450%. So as you can see, I'm well above the armor cap. I'm not exactly res capped, however these builds have a ton of damage reduction nonetheless, so you shouldn't worry about that, especially on Torment 4. And the Grizzly Bear especially gives even more sources of damage reduction, so we're never really in any real danger thanks to Fortify, Barrier, and other sources of damage reduction on this build. Alright guys, let's talk about Paragon now. Now I kept this incredibly simple. The difference between two variants is one single glyph on the last Paragon board. Everything else is exactly the same. Just to make sure we simplify this as much as possible. Everything will be down below in the planner, once again, for your reference. And of course, I won't go over every single node out there. That wouldn't make any sense. Just make sure you have all the glyphs unlocked. You have both bonuses unlocked at level 45. So you pick the necessary stats around the glyph. Make sure that the other bonuses, for example, here we have Earth and Devastation, it's 60% or is close to 60%, and make sure that you picked all the legendary nodes as well. Everything else is just a bonus. So you need roughly around 190 Paragon points to really make this build going. However, this build will be grateful with any additional points that you have, because then you can pick, these things like crit strike damage or nodes that provide damage reduction and all res. So it's definitely benefits a lot, especially defensively with more Paragon levels, but they're not needed to unlock the build. So we're starting off with Spirit. Spirit is a huge multiplier for crit strike damage. We're putting it on the starter board because starter board has the biggest amount of normal nodes. So if you find yourself with more points to spare, you can definitely select more dexterity in range, because that it's going to increase your crit strike damage even further. Board number 2 is Earth and Devastation. Because of our Earth Sign Horror, we gain the Earth skill tag on our Pulverize, so we benefit from this. You want to make sure this is as close to 60 as possible, so I have like 5% extra to go, which is not a huge damage loss, but definitely an optimization that I could do further. And this is also partially self-procced, because you have nodes like these two and these, all of these help you reach this cap, so definitely something to consider. Second glyph is Dominate. It's going to increase our overpowered damage significantly. Moving on to board number 3, we're going with Earth and Sky, and we're also going with Survival Instincts. This is just going to be another huge source of damage for us. Board number 4 is Ancestral Guidance. After we spend 75 Spirit, we deal 40% X damage for 5 seconds. Now, one ironic part of this build is because we have a lot of sources of Spirit cost reduction, it's actually going to take you a little while to hit 75 Spirit. So at the very least, we're gonna need like 5, 6, 7 casts, But because we also have tons of attack speed, this shouldn't be too hard. So we still have an uptime on Ancestral Guidance as well. For glyph number 4, we're going with Headhunter. And finally, the final glyph is going to be Heightened Malice. When we poison an enemy, we deal more damage. We're gonna poison them thanks to our weapon all the time. And final glyph is Keeper for the Grizzly Rage build, because it gives us increased non-physical damage, and the Grizzly Rage build gives us poison damage, so we only deal poison. However, if you are rocking the Petrify version, you will replace Keeper with Fang and Claw, because Petrify version deals part physical, part poison damage. So we actually, don't have the full benefit of it. And of course, you will simply adjust, the Paragon board accordingly to make sure that you're hitting this bonus. So instead of intelligence, you're gonna pick willpower. That's it. Alright, and finally, now we are in the final portion of this video, and that is the gameplay. I will show you how these builds are actually played. So let's start with the Grizzly Rage first. So, because we don't have any access on the werewolf skills after we go to Grizzly Rage, if you are blasting in the high levels of the pit, you want to make sure you get all 6 stacks of Quick Shift by using Claw and Pulverize in quick succession. With high attack speed, this is very quick, so we have 6 stacks now. Then you go to Grizzly Rage, and then anytime we kill something, anytime we overpower a boss, this is going to extend the duration of a Grizzly Rage. It's not going to work on this dummy because you cannot kill it. But in actual combat, you will see that you will never run out of Grizzly Rage for most cases. I will talk about something here. You see now? Now the Grizzly Rage dropped and it begins its entire cooldown. Now I'm not sure if this is bug or intended, but if your Grizzly Rage drops and you do not refresh it, it will start with its entire cooldown again. So the cooldown doesn't run while the Grizzly Rage is active. I don't get that. There's not a single skill in the game that behaves like that. For example, Petrify, if I hit it, it's active, it does its thing, but the cooldown, it just runs normally. And also, look how quickly I'm getting it back, by the way. See? This is the permanent uptime on Petrify. So just something to consider, that this is the biggest drawback of this build. If your Grizzly Rage drops, for example, maybe you're going from one pit level to another, or you're doing something else, then you're going to have to wait for 20 or 30 something seconds until the Grizzly Rage is back again. And between that downtime, you deal very little damage. Because thanks to our aspects, thanks to our, Rabbit Bear and Rampaging Verbeast, we're heavily relying on Grizzly Rage. If it drops, you will struggle in high levels of the pit. On Torment 4, that doesn't matter. In pit, on high levels of the pit, however, it does. But other than that, gameplay is ridiculously simple. So you basically just make sure you have 6 stacks of Quick Shift, you pop Grizzly Rage, and that's it. You are done. And then you cast Roar when you have an elite back for more damage. And that is literally the entire build. You just press Pulverize. And that is literally the entire build. So unlike my previous build that I made, maybe some like Sorcerer or Necromancer, my previous one, the Archmage Summoner, where you kind of have to do other things, you have to be involved, you have to keep mind the buffs. This one is completely brain dead, you literally just press one button and things die. So that's just amazing. Petrify plays very similarly, however we are actually trying to spam Petrify, and we have zero issues with cooldowns because, our Petrify, our herb skills are going to come up immediately. So we're just hitting things every time that they're off cooldown, and just naturally by playing the game, just naturally by killing monsters and activating Blood Howl, we will be getting Blood Howl anyway. So there's something to consider. You can even take off Claw because you don't actually really need it. You can put Trample or something else in it if you really want to. I like having Claw here, but you can activate Quick Shift just by Blood Howl and Pulverize alone. And we always have a permanent uptime on Petrify, we cast Roar, we cast Blood Howl, we have permanent uptime on Boulevard. You can see that my cooldowns are immediately back. So also another fun variant to build, and this one has an advantage that we are not reliant on waiting for our ultimate to come back, because we always get it, because it's an herb skill, and we gain cooldown reduction on overpower. So we always have Petrify on. We will have to wait for it in certain cases, and that's kind of the main advantage of this variant. However, ultimately, Grizzly Bear is a more superior version, especially for higher levels of the pit. It does have more damage, it does have overall a little bit more damage reduction, so it's meta for a reason, but again, these are two variants that you can kind of switch from depending on your needs. And also, I just wanted to show you a little bit how the two variants actually play. So first of all, if anyone tells you that Petrify variant is not powerful, I'm clearing Pit 80 with the Petrify version very easily. Exactly what we talked about here. So I'm just using Pulverize for massive amounts of AoE. By the way, I'm sorry for a bit of a lag. Every time I record, it has all these lag spikes. I can't help it. It's just my PC is old. But I mean, look at this. Petrify, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Okay, sometimes it has downtime because I wasn't attacking, but generally speaking, it's always up. And by the way, I just want to say that this run was with the exact same items and tempers that I had on my Grizzly Rage build. So I should have actually had different set of items for different tempers, Petrify duration, and all of that. But you don't even need it, you know? So this Petrify build works incredibly well. We have Bulwark active pretty much all the time. Petrify is always on, which grants us tons of resource. So we get resource back every time. We get huge bonuses of quick strike damage. Now, to be fair, yes, this build is a little bit squishier. You can see that I actually did die once in this run right over here. But hey, ultimately, you will crush any content other than, let's say, 85 plus with the Petrify version. So if this is the kind of flavor you want to play, you definitely can. Don't let anyone tell you that, you know, it's weak or something like that. It's not, and it's super fun. So if you're used to playing with Petrify, then this is definitely the build for you. Alright guys, and over here is a Grizzly Rage version of the build. So as I demonstrated before, you know, you just make sure you get 6 stacks of Quick Shift, and then you activate Grizzly Rage, and that's it. You pummel things with Petrify. It's like, what do you want me to say? This is a super stupidly easy build to play for all you dead gamers out there, you know, as the meme goes. Like, you press the right mouse button and things die. That's it. And then, that's why I really love the back plus jaw rune word, because, you know, we go in, we kill something, and then we teleport to the next pack. I just love it. You can replace that with something more offensive, and I probably will if I want to push this into, let's say, pit 100 plus. But I just love this interaction. I love teleporting around. It's so good. And as you can see, Grizzly Rage is permanently on. We have permanent, unstoppable. As I keep getting kills, the duration keeps refreshing. So I'm never running out of Grizzly Rage. The only issue you can have is, for example, if you allow the duration to expire without refreshing it. Then you're going to have to wait for full 30-something seconds until Grizzly Rage returns to you. That sucks. In that period, you do very little damage. That's really the only downside this build has. As long as you don't let that happen, then everything is fine. You have permanent unstoppable, you have huge AoE, you are so tanky, you literally cannot die, always barrier, always unstoppable, so just an amazing build. Look at this moment. So I failed to refresh the duration, and now I have to wait for 37 seconds. This is exactly what I wanted to show. Now this sucks. This is why, and now in this moment, I'm doing very little damage because we are so reliant on Grizzly Rage, you know, for the brunt of our damage output. This is the only thing that kinda really sucks. If you fail to refresh the duration of Grizzly Rage before it expires. If you don't do that, you're golden. If you do what I did, then, you know, you're gonna have to wait for 5, 4, 3 more seconds, and then once I get it again, pop, things start dying again. That's really the only downside. Other than that, my clear of this pit 90 was very comfortable. Yeah, so it's a very easy clear. Like, I would have cleared it so much faster if I didn't let the Grizzly Rage drop. It just is how it is. I'm gonna go to the boss, you know. I'm just gonna smack the boss around very quickly. Look, so I cleared pit 90 with over 9 minutes left to spare. So really, this build can easily push into 100. There are so many optimizations that I can do here. But Paragon glyphs are only level 60. You know, I still don't have damage on my aspect. I still don't have full damage on my rotting lightbringers. So there's a ton more room for improvement. So this build can definitely push into the 100, and some people already have as well. So that's kind of the gist of how this build plays, the variants, and everything else explained. And there you have it, guys. That was the Druid Pulverize build for Season 9 from start to finish. We covered both versions, with the Grizzly Rage version, which is kind of a meta right now for pit pushing, but also the Petrify version itself as well, which is powerful in its own right. So it's all about the flavor, whichever you prefer. It's nice that we have some variety. In my opinion, Petrify is kind of better speed farming because you can apply quick shift a little bit better and you don't fully rely on Grizzly Rage to do all the work for you. But for pit pushing, Grizzly Rage definitely is superior. And once again, as always, you will have the entire guide down below in the video. I'll also pin it in the comments as well. So I'm covering both variants of the build, so feel free to reference it. And if, of course, if you have any questions, just shoot me a question in the comments and I will make sure to answer as soon as I can. If you like what I'm doing and you appreciate all the effort and work that goes into these kind of videos, then I would appreciate if you drop a like and sub to the channel, because it really helps me out tremendously. Anyway, this is gonna be it for me today. I'm Fallen Messiah, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.